Hey everyone, welcome back to the Green Witch Homestead. Not much has been happening here on our farm lately. We've had a family issue as well as a copious amount of rain, which makes working out in the garden a little difficult. I do have a few updates on the garden. We have harvested all of the onions. We also had to pull the garlic out. Usually I wait until 4th of July, which is today for you watching. But I had to pull them out a couple days early because with all the rain we've been getting, I noticed that the stems were starting to get a little mold on them. So I didn't want to lose my garlic. I'm going to take you down through, just do a little update video on how the garden's doing and where everything is in the farm. We are in a season of change right now. July marks the switch over and you're getting ready to start your next string of planting. I only grow the hardneck garlic because that's what I prefer. Just like the onions, you have to lay it out to let it cure. Garlic is just a little bit different than onions. With the onions, you're curing them and letting it dry out so it forms that protective papery skin around it. The garlic, you're doing similar thing, but however, you're also bringing out that garlic flavor. Now, there are two different types of garlic that you can grow, which we've talked of before. You have the hardneck garlic and you have the softneck garlic. The hardneck garlic is the ones that you most often see in the store that have that perfect little circular bunch of cloves around a single center stalk. That's the garlic that I grow. The reason we grow them is because those are the ones that put off garlic scapes, which as you've seen before, we do use those in different things. Now, the soft neck garlic is the one that you see that gets put in those fancy braids. If you like the look of storing your garlic in those braids, then you want to go with the soft neck variety. The hard necks, once you've cured them and dried them, then you would snip off the stem just above the clove and store them in a basket or in a mesh bag. It's on the vegetable garden up front. My Swiss chard here, my tower, is going strong. This area here, I'm waiting on the ability to get some paper stones to make my little seating area. My sunflower patch is coming along nicely, as well as my little front section. I've put in some silver mound and some creeping jenny, as well as some annual petunias. And our corn is doing pretty well. Everybody's up. They're a little shorter than I'd like them to be this time of year. Our squash is doing amazing. These here are the acorn squash, and it's hard to tell. I don't know if you can see. I've kind of got a little fence piece, and so the squash is planted right down here, and it's growing up this angled trellis, and then I have another squash planted down there growing up that angled trellis. I also have some corn growing in there. These are the older corns that I planted the first time that didn't get eaten. This beautiful patch right here that looks kind of like sunflowers, this is our Jerusalem artichokes. Not many people know what a Jerusalem artichoke is. Also are called sunchokes. They are in the sunflower family. You harvest the roots from the plants after the plants have died off in the fall, and they will stay in the ground all winter long. They're really... they're very hard to describe. They're very much like a potato in texture and consistency, but the flavor of a sunflower seed. They do have a very high inulin count to them, which is really good if you're a diabetic. However, it will mess with your guts a little bit and you will get very flatulent if you eat too much Jerusalem artichokes. Cooking them and peeling them does help with that a little bit though. My carrot bed is still going strong. It's just a really pretty bed to look at, honestly. People do grow carrots in rows and stuff like that, but I've never bothered. You just plant them and then thin them out a little bit and they do fine. Finally, catching up and growing. We've got some serranos, and then these are my hot peppers on this side. Serrano peppers, some ghost peppers here, and then these are chocolate reapers. I have the marigolds in there to help with pest control. With the peas this year, a lot of people have said the same. The peas they didn't do very good. They took a long time to get started. They did produce, and we did get some peas off of them. However, they're only a couple feet tall. Last year, the peas were over my head and flopping over. And so I'm not sure what it is about this season or this year that is making a difference, but it is nice and comforting to know that I'm not the only one. Let me know down below if you guys have had any trouble growing peas or beans. My one single zucchini that's over here in the crook of my pepper bed is actually doing really well. So I'm kind of impressed with it. Usually my zucchinis are dead by now from the squash bugs. I've also got nadapinos over here, and they are finally starting to pick up and perk up. Remember this monstrosity. She's looking a little worse for wear, but I gotta show you, she is just putting off some crazy flower stalks. So I've picked a lot of these flowers off for making the earache medicine. Now these two long beds back here, these are the projects for this next coming weeks. This is where the onions were in this bed, and then this is where the cabbage and stuff was in this bed. There's still a couple cabbages in there. We're just kind of eating off of them. I've got some bush beans started on this side, and these will be replanted. I haven't quite decided what I'm going to put in them yet. More than likely these are just going to get weeded, topped off with some fresh compost, and then covered in mulch and let sit and rest for a couple weeks before the fall harvest crops go in there, like more broccoli and cabbage and cauliflower. This is where the garlic was, and I'm going to finish weeding it, and I'm going to be putting some ground cherries in here for the summer. Garlic is one of those things that really prefers to grow in the same spot every year. I'm not 100% sure on all the reasons as to why that is, but I do know that is the case. So I will always put my garlic in this bed. I plant my garlic on Halloween and I harvest it on 4th of July. So this bed would sit empty for most of that time in between, but because there's not going to be anything else that needs to go in here until Halloween, I can put a summer crop in there, like a ground cherry or a tomatillo or some radishes or beets or something that turns around pretty quickly. I've got my trellises up, and we've got cucumbers on that side of this one and some beans on this side. I don't remember the variety of these beans. And then over here on the tall trellis, I had planted some rampicante squash here. It turns out they weren't rampicante squash, they were another set of zucchini, and the squash bugs got them, so I did pull them out. I have the Chinese red noodle beans on this side growing. We have one overachiever, but as you can see, I've already got some babies on here, and I'm really excited. I've heard good things about these guys, and I've never had a chance to grow them before, so I'm super excited, and all the rest are catching up pretty good. And also, look at this. Just look at that. Like, how pretty is that? And of course, there's the thing that my husband dislikes the most about my garden, which is this hot mess. This is my tea garden. This is my herb garden. This is my baby. And yes, it looks like a weedy mass of ugliness, but is 100% usable. So we've got medicinal plants in there, I've got mother's wort, I've got raspberries growing in there, there's some irises just on the outer edge for pretty and for attracting pollinators. I've got basil, I've got cilantro, I've got lemon balm, I've got rosemary, I've got lavender, I have goji berries, I have oregano, I have a little pretty tea rose, and I have my poppies are in there. So this is kind of my testament to that witch garden, that little potager crazy mess that nobody knows really what it is except for the person who planted it. And I don't know, I love it. It's my little bit of chaos. This is our first green stalk that we got, and we had lettuce in it at the beginning of the season, and I've switched over to the strawberries. As you can see, I've got them planted in the top row, and I'm letting the runners come down and planting them out. I'm gonna fill this up. Right now, the bottom rows here that the strawberries are not going to be able to get to this season, I've got peanuts planted in. That's a first for me. We'll see how that goes. They're a really interesting plant on how they grow. But no more hesitating. Let's get to the part y'all want to see. Tomatoes. Don't judge me. This has been a weird year with acquiring things that I would normally need. I had fully intended on having these beds a little bit longer and having cattle panels up to support my tomatoes this year. However, acquiring the parts needed for the beds was difficult. Acquiring the cattle panels has been difficult. So we put the beds in at this size, and come the fall when everything's pulled out, I can very easily add another piece to make them the full 9 feet beds that I want. However, if I didn't want to miss the opportunity to grow tomatoes this year, I had to plant in them with what we had. So we did the 6-foot beds and we planted tomatoes. I've got 10 tomatoes in each bed, which a lot of people might say, oh my god, that's too many tomatoes, it's too close, you're gonna stunt your harvest or whatnot. I grow single stem, and I trellis my tomatoes and I prune them, and that keeps them growing upright, and it keeps them very aerated at the bottom, and you can grow them a little closer together and not have to worry about stuff like that. It's a little bit more hands-on. It does require a lot more work and vigilance on your part to keep your tomatoes healthy, but it allows me to grow more in a smaller space. And if anybody doubts this method, and just, there you go. That's one tomato on there. These are my red slicer bed here, and you can see they're doing really good. Now I've got them on the single stalk support. I haven't had a chance to tie everybody up yet, so they're a little floppy, but it's not hurting them. Over here are determinate tomatoes, and I said I was going to try them this year, see how they do. I don't like them. I'll probably never grow them again. They're real short and stumpy, and they're not just doing what I want them to do. I've got my Golden Delicious over there in the pot. She's doing okay. Tucked in the middle here, I've got some calendula growing and a couple eggplants. I have some other varieties planted in these two beds. These are all fancy tomatoes. So I've got Dr. Witchies, I've got White Beauties, I've got Lemon Queens, and I'm kind of really, every plant has tomatoes on it. I've got a little bit of leaf curl going on, as you can see here. The reason I have that happening to my tomatoes right now is, as I said earlier in the video, we have had some pretty crazy weather for this time of year. We've had almost every day downpours, overcast, lots of cloudy, cool weather, and a lot of rain. So what that means, it's not bad for the tomatoes to go through that. In fact, actually, they probably prefer having that cooler weather longer. However, when that goes away, like today, that heat comes in and that sun comes in, and they're not used to it. It's very much like when you start your plants inside and you have to harden them off before you put them out in the garden. That's what they're going through now. However, I can't harden them off because they're almost fully grown and I can't move them. So they're just kind of having to suffer through that change. They got used to that cool, wet weather, and now they're getting this hot, dry weather that we're supposed to have this time of year, and they don't like it. The fun thing with tomatoes is they're really forgiving, so they will bounce back. Well, that's pretty much what's going on in the upper garden. There's not a lot of different plants this time of year. Like I said, we're in our changeover season. We've done some harvesting, we've put some stuff away, and now we're getting into that time of abundance. The tomatoes are going to start to blush soon. The peppers are going to start to produce. Our beans are starting to put off fruit. It's gearing up for that time of plenty, and it's getting a little exciting. I'm going to take you down when we go to put the cattle panels up on the market garden tomatoes and show you what's going on down there. So I'm going to do a quick update on the market garden. It's really hot and very bright out here. I don't like being out in the middle of the day. Usually we do our work out here first thing in the morning or in the evening once the sun's gone down. Everything is growing amazingly down here. Well, maybe not amazingly, but much better than it had or would have had we not done any of the treatment to the soil. So we've got a first row of tomatoes, and then I've got peppers, okra, another row of tomatoes, and then bush beans. Everything looks a little wilty. We've had nothing but rain for the last 2 weeks, so this is the first couple days where it's finally gotten warm and hot again and the plants aren't liking it. My tomatoes have already gotten fairly huge, if you can see that behind me, so we're going to be putting the cattle panels up today and getting them strung up so they can keep growing. So far there's nothing really to harvest down here yet, but everything's growing real fast and it won't be long before we have baskets of produce to bring to the market. Our potato section is done. It's a pile of weeds right now because I've just kind of let it sit for a little bit. We're going to turn it all over and let it compost back down into the soil. And then we'll start putting straw down on it and covering it up for putting potatoes in for a fall harvest. And that black patch on the other side of the potatoes is our watermelons. They are in the ground, but they're not doing much yet. They just got started. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed and appreciated that little garden update. Something for me that I've learned a lot as I've grown as a gardener is that the garden is not this full basket of the produce section that everybody thinks it is or that you see in the movies. You very rarely have more than 3 or 4 things ripe at the same time in the garden. Being a gardener, you kind of have to learn how to change with the seasons and plant things when they would grow to get the best harvest and to get the best yield out of what you're planting. It means that the garden doesn't look as picture perfect as you'd like it to, but I guarantee that you get a better quality of food. Well, it's 4th of July weekend. My tent's all set up, so I'm gonna go out and enjoy celebrating our independence with family and friends. I hope you guys get to as well. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think of the garden, and what are you guys doing for 4th of July? Happy Independence Day, and remember, get your hands dirty.